The alien scout ship drifted silently through the darkness of space, its purple-tinted hull reflecting the distant starlight. Captain Root of the Galactic Council's exploration fleet stood proudly on his command deck, his 4 eyes scanning the unfamiliar star system. This was his 100th first contact mission, and he had grown confident in his ability to handle primitive species. "Captain, we're detecting an unknown vessel near the 4th planet," reported his sensor officer. "It appears to be using primitive propulsion technology." Root clicked his mandibles in amusement. Another young species trying to reach for the stars. How cute. The Galactic Council had done this thousands of times before. Find a developing civilization, show overwhelming force, and peacefully incorporate them into the Council's protection. Some called it subjugation, but Root preferred to think of it as guidance. "Move closer," he ordered. "Let's get a good look at their little ship." As they approached, Root studied the vessel on his main screen. The ship was bulky and practical, with HMS Thunder written in strange symbols on its side. Crude thrusters dotted its hull, and basic radio signals emanated from its communication array. Root had seen better technology in his children's toys. "Open a channel," he commanded. "Let's give them their first taste of galactic civilization." The human ship responded immediately. A calm voice echoed through Root's bridge. "This is Captain Tom Walker of the HMS Thunder. We are on a peaceful exploration mission. Please identify yourself." Root smiled. They didn't even have proper visual communication. "This is Captain Root of the Galactic Council. Your species has been deemed ready for first contact. Prepare to be boarded for assessment. Resistance is unnecessary. We are far more advanced than you could imagine." There was a pause before the human captain responded. "I'm afraid we can't allow boarding without proper diplomatic channels. Perhaps we could arrange a formal meeting with our government representatives." Root sighed. They always wanted to do things their way. "I'm afraid you don't understand your situation. We are not asking." He turned to his weapons officer. "Fire a warning shot. Low power, just enough to shake them up." The alien weapon flashed, sending a bolt of energy toward the human ship. What happened next would haunt Root's dreams forever. The bolt never reached its target. Instead, it dissipated against an energy shield far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. The bulky, primitive-looking ship suddenly transformed before their eyes. Panels shifted, revealing rows of weapon ports. The crude thrusters flickered and died, replaced by drive systems Root couldn't even recognize. "This is your only warning." Captain Walker's voice came again, now hard as steel. "Withdraw immediately." Root's crew stared in shock at their sensors. The primitive vessel was now pumping out enough energy to power a small sun. Its weapons were locked on their ship's critical systems, with targeting systems centuries ahead of their own. "Impossible," Root whispered. "Your technology. You were hiding it." "Captain," his sensor officer's voice shook. "I'm detecting materials in their hull that aren't in our database. Their weapons, our shields wouldn't even slow them down." "This is a peaceful exploration mission." Walker's voice remained calm. "But HMS Thunder is still a warship of humanity. We simply prefer to avoid showing our teeth unless someone forces us to. You have 30 seconds to retreat." Root had never ordered a retreat in his entire career. Today, he set a new record for how quickly a Galactic Council ship could turn around and engage its fastest drive. As they fled back to Council space, Root's hands shook as he wrote his report. How could he explain this? They had found a species that didn't just match Council technology. They surpassed it. And worse, this wasn't even their main fleet. This was just an exploration vessel. For the first time in his long career, Root felt real fear about what lurked in the unknown regions of space. If this was a human explorer, what would their actual warships be like? He had to warn the Council, but somehow, he knew they wouldn't believe him. They never believed stories about superior species. They would all learn soon enough. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with angry voices. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in rising circles around the central platform, where Captain Root stood alone, finishing his report about the human ship. "Impossible," shouted Delegate Mason, his crystalline body flashing red with anger. "No young species could hide such technology. Your sensors must have malfunctioned." Root kept his forehands steady at his sides. "The data is correct. The human ship was far more advanced than anything in our fleet. We should approach them with caution and respect." High Counselor Webb, the oldest member of the council, leaned forward on his floating platform. His gray scales showed his age, but his eyes still burned with pride. "In 10,000 years, no species has ever matched our technology. These humans are barely space-capable. They still use primitive rockets to reach their own moon. That's what they want us to think," Root insisted. "They hide their real technology. Their exploration ship alone could have destroyed my entire squadron." The chamber erupted in laughter. Root's mandibles clicked in frustration. These fools would doom them all with their pride. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Admiral James Stone stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station. Holographic screens showed the movements of alien ships near human space. "They're coming," said his intelligence officer, pointing to a large fleet of council ships moving toward Earth. "Looks like they didn't take Captain Walker's warning seriously." Stone nodded, his weathered face showing no emotion. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. "How many ships?" 300, sir. They're calling it a peacekeeping force." Stone allowed himself a small smile. "Time to show them what a real human warship can do. Send the message to unveil the dreadnought." Deep within Jupiter's orbit, hidden by advanced stealth systems, humanity's first true warship waited. The HMS Dreadnought was 5 kilometers long, built not to look impressive, but to fight effectively. Unlike the exploration vessels that hid their strength behind false walls, the Dreadnought was pure power. Back in the council chamber, the delegates were still arguing when emergency alerts flashed across all screens. A new ship had appeared in the path of their peacekeeping fleet. "What is that?" High Counselor Webb demanded, his scales now pale with shock. The sensor data showed a massive vessel, larger than any council ship ever built. Its energy readings were off the charts. This was no exploration vessel pretending to be weak. This was a true warship designed to strike fear into its enemies. "Message coming in from the human ship," announced the communication officer. Admiral Stone's voice filled the chamber. "This is Admiral James Stone of the HMS Dreadnought. Your fleet is approaching Earth space without permission. We have already warned you once. There will not be a third warning." The council members watched in horror as their sensors revealed more details about the Dreadnought. Its hull was made of materials their science couldn't explain. Its weapons could tear through their strongest shields like paper. And worst of all, it was just sitting there, showing no fear of their massive fleet. "They're bluffing," Webb declared, but his voice shook. "One ship cannot stand against 300. Shall we test that theory?" Stone's voice was calm. "Or would you prefer to withdraw and open proper diplomatic channels?" In the tense silence that followed, Captain Root stepped forward again. "High Counselors, I beg you to listen. I saw what one of their small ships could do. This vessel, it could destroy our entire fleet." The council members looked at each other nervously. Their pride said to attack, to put these upstart humans in their place. But their fear told them something else. High Counselor Webb stared at the image of the Dreadnought for a long moment. Then he did something no High Counselor had done in 10,000 years. He gave the order to retreat. As the council fleet turned around, Stone sent one final message. "Next time, try knocking politely. You'll find we can be quite friendly when treated with respect." The council chamber was silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity was the one changing it. High Counselor Webb couldn't sleep. For 3 days, he had tossed and turned in his quarters, his pride eating away at him. The image of the council fleet retreating from a single human ship haunted him. In a rage, he made a decision that would change galactic history. Launch the attack, he ordered through his personal command line. Don't give them time to respond. Show these humans what real power looks like. The Council's main battle fleet, 700 warships strong, jumped into Earth's solar system. They emerged near Mars, weapons hot, and shields at maximum power. This time, there would be no retreat. Admiral Stone stood calmly on the Dreadnought's bridge as red alerts flashed across every screen. He had expected this. Wounded pride was often more dangerous than any weapon. "They're launching fighters," reported his tactical officer. "Lots of them. At least 10,000 small craft." Stone nodded. "Send the message to all ships. Execute Battle Plan Thunder." Suddenly, space itself seemed to ripple around the Council fleet. 5 more human warships, sisters to the Dreadnought, appeared from their stealth fields. They had been waiting in ambush positions, hidden by technology the Council couldn't even detect. "Impossible," Webb shouted from his flagship. "Their energy signatures. We should have seen them." The human warships moved with impossible grace for vessels so large. They slid into attack formation, their weapons charging with enough power to make the Council's sensors scream in warning. "This is Admiral Stone," his voice broadcast across all frequencies. "You were warned. Remember, you chose this." The battle that followed would be told and retold across the galaxy for centuries. The Council fleet fired first, launching a massive wave of energy weapons. Their commanders watched confidently, expecting to see the human ships torn apart. Instead, their weapons splashed harmlessly against shields that glowed with strange, shifting colors. "Our turn," Stone said quietly. The Dreadnought and its sister ships fired their main guns, but instead of energy beams or plasma, they launched what looked like small silver spheres. The Council fleet's commanders laughed at first, until the spheres passed straight through their strongest shields as if they weren't there. The spheres attached to Council ships and began to grow, spreading like liquid metal across their hulls. Systems began shutting down. Weapons went offline. Engines died. "What is this?" Webb demanded, watching in horror as his mighty fleet was disabled ship by ship. "Smart matter," Stone explained over the open channel. "A little gift from our nanotechnology division. Don't worry, it won't harm your crews. It just puts your ships to sleep." The Council fighters swarmed forward, trying to overwhelm the human ships with sheer numbers. The human vessels responded by launching their own fighters, sleek, angular craft that moved like they were alive. Each human fighter could take on dozens of Council craft, dancing through their fire like it was standing still. In the middle of the battle, the Dreadnought suddenly accelerated to impossible speed, charging straight for Webb's flagship. Council gunners fired everything they had, but they couldn't even scratch the massive warship's paint. The Dreadnought pulled up alongside Webb's ship, dwarfing it completely. Through his bridge windows, Webb could see the human vessel's weapon ports open, but they didn't fire. "This battle is over," Stone announced. "Your ships are disabled. Your fighters are retreating. You have lost. But we're not going to destroy you." Webb's hands shook as he replied, "Why? Why show mercy?" "Because we're not the monsters you think we are," Stone said. "We build strong ships and powerful weapons because the galaxy is dangerous. But we'd rather make friends than enemies. Your fleet will be released once we've established proper diplomatic relations." As Webb looked out at his mighty fleet, now floating helpless in space, he finally understood. Humanity hadn't just matched Council technology. They had surpassed it generations ago, and they had done it without losing their humanity. The battle was over in less than an hour. Not a single life was lost. But the message was clear. Humanity's warships didn't bring terror through destruction, but through the simple, unstoppable demonstration of power held in check by mercy. The galaxy would never be the same. In the smoky darkness of the galaxy's most popular trading station bar, the stellar wind, an old Council pilot's hands shook as he told his story for the 100th time. "Their ships appeared from nowhere," he said, his scales pale with remembered fear. One moment we had 700 ships ready to attack Earth. The next moment, he took a long drink from his glass. "What happened next?" asked a young merchant, leaning forward with wide eyes. "They shut down our entire fleet without killing a single person. Their technology, it was like magic." Around the bar, dozens of aliens from different species listened. Some were traders, others were diplomats, and a few were spies pretending to be something else. They all had one thing in common. They wanted to know more about these humans who had humbled the mighty council. At a corner table, a human trader named Jack quietly sipped his drink, listening to the stories spread. He wore simple clothes and looked harmless, exactly how humans like to appear. Nobody noticed the small smile on his face. Meanwhile, in the grand libraries of the Council's capital world, scholars worked day and night studying human history. What they found terrified them more than any warship. "Look at this," said Chief Researcher Bill, his tentacles waving in agitation as he showed ancient Earth videos to his team. They fought wars with primitive weapons that killed millions. They split atoms for bombs. They nearly destroyed their own world several times. His assistant looked up from another screen. But they also wrote beautiful poetry, created amazing art, and composed music that could make you cry. How can they be both? In another part of space, aboard a luxury passenger ship, a group of wealthy aliens watched a recording of the battle for the 100th time. They saw the massive human warships appear like ghosts, their strange weapons bypassing the Council's best shields like they weren't there. "I heard they're already building trade routes," said one passenger, his fur rippling with excitement. "My company wants to be the first to set up regular commerce with Earth." "Are you crazy?" another replied. "They're too dangerous." "No," said a third voice, older and wiser. "They're not dangerous. They're powerful. There's a difference. Look how they won without killing anyone." The news continued to spread. In distant colonies, children played new games, pretending to be human warships appearing from nowhere. In military academies across the galaxy, instructors tore up their old textbooks. Everything they knew about space warfare had changed. Back on the Council capital world, High Counselor Webb sat in his private chamber, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. His aide entered with yet another datapad. "Sir," the aide said nervously, "we've finished our deep analysis of human communication channels." "And?" Webb asked. "They've been watching us for over 100 years. Every time we thought we were discovering their colonies or trade routes, they were letting us find exactly what they wanted us to see." Webb sighed. "How many ships do they really have?" "We don't know. The 6 we saw in battle might be all of them, or they might have thousands more hiding in that stealth field technology we still can't detect." A message flashed on Webb's screen, another request for trade negotiations from a Council world. It was the 5th one today. Everyone wanted to be friends with the humans now. In the Stellar Wind Bar, the old pilot was finishing his story. "You know what the scariest part was?" he asked his audience. "The humans weren't even angry when they beat us. Their admiral just sounded disappointed, like parents dealing with children who wouldn't listen." Jack, the human trader in the corner, finally stood up. The room went quiet as he walked to the bar for another drink. Every alien in the place watched him, studying his movements, looking for some sign of the power they now knew humans possessed. He turned to face them, smiling kindly. "You know," he said, "we really do prefer making friends to fighting. Anyone want to hear about our trade goods? I've got some wonderful Earth coffee you might enjoy." The aliens looked at each other nervously. Then, slowly, they began to smile back. Perhaps these terrifying humans weren't so bad after all. But they never forgot what human warships could do when pushed too far. Captain Black stood on the bridge of his pirate flagship, the Skull Crusher, watching the human cargo ship through his view screen. His crew of outcasts and criminals had spent weeks studying human shipping routes, looking for an easy target. "They're just stories," he told his nervous crew. "All this talk about powerful human warships, I bet the council just made up excuses for losing. His scaled skin gleamed in the dim light as he smiled. That cargo ship is carrying Earth metals worth millions. Take it. The pirate fleet, 30 heavily armed ships, moved in for the attack. The human cargo vessel, named Lucky Star, was big and slow, seemingly defenseless. Human vessel, Black broadcast, prepare to be boarded. Resist, and we'll blow you apart. The response came quickly. This is Captain Mike of the Lucky Star. We surrender. Please don't hurt my crew. Black laughed. This was too easy. The stories about terrifying human warships must have been lies. His ships surrounded the cargo vessel, preparing their boarding tubes. That's when everything went wrong. Sir, his sensor officer screamed. 2 ships just appeared behind us. Black spun around. Where empty space had been seconds before, now floated the HMS Dreadnought and HMS Thunderchild. Their massive forms blocked out the stars, their weapon ports already open. This is Admiral Stone of the HMS Dreadnought, came the calm voice that had become famous across the galaxy. You have exactly 10 seconds to power down your weapons and engines. 9, 8. It's a trap, Black shouted. All ships, fire everything. The pirates launched every weapon they had. Plasma bolts, energy beams, and missiles streaked toward the human warships. The Dreadnought and Thunderchild didn't even bother raising their shields. The pirate weapons hit their targets and did absolutely nothing. The massive human ships simply absorbed the attacks like they were raindrops. Time's up, Stone said. Lieutenant, disable their ships. Try not to scratch their paint. We don't want to make insurance claims more complicated. The Thunderchild moved first. It launched what looked like small drones, hundreds of them, each no bigger than a human hand. The drones zipped between the pirate ships, attaching themselves to engines and weapon systems. Keep firing. Black ordered, but it was useless. Ship after ship went dark as the drones shut down their systems. The Dreadnought then did something even more terrifying. It launched boarding pods. Black watched in horror as human marines in powered armor cut through his ship's hull like it was paper. Interesting thing about pirates, Stone's voice came through again, now sounding almost cheerful. You're not protected by any treaties. We could legally destroy every ship in your fleet. Black's bridge door opened. Human marines walked in, their armor making them look like walking tanks. Their weapons weren't even raised. They didn't need to be. But that would be wasteful, Stone continued. Instead, you're all going to help us with a little public service announcement. 1 week later, in bars and trading posts across the galaxy, everyone watched the video. 30 pirate ships, being towed behind the Dreadnought like toys on strings, their crews in custody, their weapons stripped. Let this be a lesson, Admiral Stone's voice announced in the video. Human space is safe space. We protect all peaceful traders, not just our own. If you're thinking about piracy in our sectors, the video showed the captured pirates in their cells, looking very sorry for themselves. Well, just don't. Back in the Stellar Wind Bar, the old council pilot who loved telling stories about human ships smiled at his audience. You know what the really scary part is? He said, those cargo ships the pirates tried to rob, they're not defenseless at all. The humans just let pirates attack them sometimes, using them as bait to catch bigger fish. A young alien raised his hand. But how do the humans always know where the pirates will attack? The old pilot laughed. They don't. Their warships are everywhere, hiding in that stealth field technology. You never know if there's a human warship watching you right now. Everyone in the bar looked around nervously, wondering if somewhere, just out of sight, a massive human vessel was floating silent and invisible, keeping the peace in its own terrifying way. After that day, piracy in human-controlled space dropped to 0. Nobody wanted to risk meeting the Dreadnought. The emergency alarm blared through the small colony of Green Haven. The settlement's 10,000 alien residents rushed to their shelters as 3 massive raid ships appeared in orbit. These weren't pirates. They were worse. They were the Blood Hunters, a species that lived for war. Governor Ted of Greenhaven sent out a desperate distress call, knowing help would come too late. The colony was too far from council space for anyone to save them. All citizens, he announced, his forearms trembling, prepare for the worst. The Blood Hunters never take prisoners. The raid ships began their descent, their weapons charging. The colonists huddled in their shelters, parents holding their children close. Then something strange happened. The raid ships stopped. In orbit above Greenhaven, the Blood Hunter commander stared in disbelief at his sensors. A human warship had appeared between his ships and the colony. It was the HMS Thunderchild. Unknown vessels, came the human transmission. This colony is under Earth's protection. Withdraw immediately. The Blood Hunters had never retreated from battle in their 1,000-year history. They lived to fight. They died to fight. Their commander grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. One ship, he growled back. You face 3 raid ships. We are the Blood Hunters. We fear nothing. You misunderstand, the human captain replied calmly. I'm not threatening you. I'm trying to save your lives. Before the Blood Hunters could respond, 5 more human warships appeared around them, weapons ready. The HMS Dreadnought led them. The Blood Hunters did something that day they had never done before. They ran. News of the incident spread quickly. Within a week, 14 more colonies had requested human protection. Within a month, the number grew to 50. In the council chambers, High Counselor Webb watched the latest report with mixed feelings. They're taking over the galaxy, he said to his advisors, but not with weapons. They're doing it by being helpful. His top military advisor nodded. Yesterday, a human medical ship saved an entire mining colony from a virus outbreak. Last week, their engineers helped fix a failing planetary shield on the outer rim. They're everywhere, helping everyone. And their warships? Webb asked. Always nearby, but never threatening unless attacked. They're like guardians. In a distant space station, Admiral Stone met with representatives from 20 different species. The station's meeting room was crowded with aliens of all shapes and sizes, each wanting to learn from humans. Your ships are powerful, said one delegate, a floating crystal being. But what amazes us is how you use that power. You could conquer us all, but instead you protect trade routes and save colonies. Stone smiled. Strength isn't just about having the biggest guns. It's about knowing when not to use them. The meeting was interrupted by an aide rushing in. Admiral, 3 council worlds are reporting simultaneous pirate attacks. Stone didn't even look worried. He tapped his command pad twice. Taken care of. The Dreadnought's sister ships were already in position. The pirates are being arrested as we speak. The alien delegates looked at each other in amazement. The humans had known about the attacks before they happened. Their ships had been waiting invisibly, ready to help. Back on Greenhaven, Governor Ted watched his colony's children playing in the streets, unafraid for the first time in years. High above, invisible but always present, a human warship kept watch. In the Stellar Wind Bar, the old council pilot was telling a new story. You know why the humans are different? He asked his audience. Most species build warships because they want to fight. Humans built them because they never want to fight again. They made their ships so powerful that most battles end before they begin. A young alien raised his hand. But aren't you still scared of them? The pilot thought for a moment. Scared? No. Respectful? Yes. They're like the galaxy's older siblings now. Sure, they could knock you down if they wanted to, but mostly they just want to make sure nobody else does. Around the galaxy, more colonies began displaying a new symbol, Earth's flag alongside their own. It wasn't a sign of submission. It was a sign of trust. The humans' warships still brought terror, but only to those who threatened the peace. 10 years after humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, the HMS Dreadnought floated silently in orbit around Earth. Admiral Stone, now with more gray in his hair, stood at his familiar spot on the bridge, watching ships from 100 different worlds pass through Earth's space lanes. "Admiral," his communication officer called out, "the new Galactic Defense Council is ready to begin their first meeting." Stone nodded. Who would have thought that the same ship that once terrified the galaxy would now host its peace conference? The Dreadnought's main conference room had been specially modified for this historic meeting. Representatives from 50 major species sat around a large table, while High Counselor Webb, now much humbler than before, stood to speak. 10 years ago, Webb began, "We thought humans were primitives. We were wrong. Today, they've helped create something we never could, true galactic peace." On screens around the galaxy, billions watched as the new Galactic Defense Treaty was signed. Under the agreement, human warships would officially become peacekeepers for all member worlds. In return, these worlds would share their unique technologies and cultures with Earth. But remember, Stone addressed the gathering, "Our ships are not here to rule. We're here to protect. Every world keeps its independence. Every species keeps its culture. We're guardians, not conquerors." Far across the galaxy, in the same colony of Green Haven that the humans had saved from the Blood Hunters, Governor Ted's children attended a new school. Inside, young aliens learned alongside human children who had moved to the colony with their families. "Can someone tell me," the teacher asked, "why human ships don't need to fight anymore?" A small crystal child raised her light beam. "Because they're so strong that nobody wants to fight them." "Close," the teacher smiled. "But it's more than that. They're strong enough that they can choose to be kind." Meanwhile, at the Stellar Wind Bar, now twice its original size and featuring real Earth coffee, the old council pilot sat with a human captain, sharing stories. "You know what still amazes me," the pilot said. "We thought you were showing off when you revealed your warships, but you were holding back, weren't you?" The human captain smiled. "We still are. The Dreadnought may look impressive, but it's not our strongest ship. True power isn't about showing everything you have." In Earth's shipyards, newer vessels were being built, not for war, but for exploration and rescue. They carried the most powerful weapons ever created, but their main features were medical bays, science labs, and cultural exchange centers. The HMS Hope, humanity's newest ship, launched that day. Bigger than the Dreadnought, but designed to look friendly despite its size, it carried a crew of humans and aliens working together. Its mission was to explore the unknown regions of space, not to conquer them, but to help any civilizations they found. Back on the Dreadnought, Admiral Stone finished the peace conference with a final message. A wise human once said that great power comes with great responsibility. Our warships brought terror to the stars, yes, but that terror has been replaced by hope. We were strong enough to win any war, but we chose to win the peace instead. As the delegates departed, Webb stayed behind to speak with Stone privately. "You could have conquered us all," he said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Stone's answer was simple. "Because then we wouldn't be human anymore. Our ships were never meant to rule the galaxy. They were meant to protect it. There's a difference." That night, on countless worlds across the galaxy, people looked up at their skies with a new feeling. Somewhere up there, invisible but ever-present, human ships washed over them. Children no longer had nightmares about space pirates or raiders. Traders no longer feared the deep space routes. The galaxy had found its guardians. The HMS Dreadnought still brought terror, but only in old stories told to remind people of how peace was won. The ship that had once frightened the galaxy had become a symbol of something greater. The day when humanity proved that the strongest warriors can choose to be the kindest guardians. And the stars were better for it.